The Zohar Kadosh says that it is important for a woman to cover every single hair on her head. Every single hair on her head. That's the Zohar. It's not halacha. It's the Zohar. Zohar is not where we get halacha from. Halacha comes from the Shulchan Aruch. Shulchan Aruch comes from the rabbis, the sages. Now the Zohar also comes from the sages, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. But we don't psak halacha from the Zohar. Because if we did, we wouldn't survive a week. Because some of the other things that the Zohar Kadosh says are simply impossible for the average person to even the high-level person, to live by. Impossible. In any generation, not just our generation. So we don't psak halacha from the Zohar. You can do certain things that the Zohar Kadosh say, but you don't psak halacha, meaning you don't say, this is what you're supposed to do. Why? Because what you're supposed to do is decreed by the sages. Now, what is the power of the sages? The Gemara in Masechet Rosh Hashanah asks a question. What's the first Bet Din that ever existed? Answer is the Bet Din of Moshe Rabbeinu. Bet Din of Moshe Rabbeinu. In two places, there's a mention of the Bet Din of Moshe Rabbeinu in the Torah. And it says, Moshe, Aaron, Nadav, and Avihu. That's and the 70 elders. Moshe, Aaron, Nadav, and Avihu, and the 70 elders. In a different place, it also mentions two other names. But it again mentions the 70 elders. Mentions the 70 elders. So, the question is, how come it mentions this is the first Bedin? Meaning, this is it. There was never a Bedin more powerful than this Bedin. Any Bedin that wants to change a law has to be greater than the Bedin that judged it. Meaning, if a Bedin today in Florida made a rule, we're not allowed to make any new rules, just so you know. Let's say Psaka Halacha, from their understanding of something, and Kehillah complained, and they don't like this rule. In order for anything to be overturned, they have to go to a bigger Bedin to overturn it. What's a bigger Bedin? You go to the Rabbanut in Eretz Yisrael. Go to Rabbanut in Eretz Yisrael, it says they'll look at it, they'll review it. If they agree with what you're saying, they can overrule the Bedin here. Why? They're the bigger Bedin. If the Rabbanut in Eretz Yisrael makes a law, no one can overrule them. Why? There's no bigger Bedin than them. There's no bigger Bedin than them. So the only one that can overrule it is someone from a previous generation, but that doesn't exist. You have to go back in time. Which means that, by default, the biggest Bedin that ever existed is the first Bedin of Moshe Rabbeinu. So the Gemara asks, okay, if this Bedin is the greatest of great and the best of the best, how come we don't have the names? We have Moshe. Good. We have Aaron. Good. Nadav and Avihu. Good. Two other people. Good. But how come we don't have the other 70? They were great. The Gemara says something amazing. The Gemara says, this is to teach you. You, meaning you, here. Year 2019 according to the Notzrim. Or 5779 according to the Jews. To teach you that the Torah already knew that you're going to come here with your questions. And you're going to say, wait a minute. In the time of Moshe Rabbeinu, they said don't drive on Shabbat because Moshe didn't have a car. They said don't wear a wig because no one had any wigs back then. They say don't do this, don't do that because of this. But the reality is, at the end of the day, they had Moshe Rabbeinu as the Bedin. They had Aaron as the Bedin. They had Nadav and Avihu. They had greats. So this rabbi over here, what is he, Moshe? This rabbi over here, what is he, Aaron? This rabbi over here is Nadav and Avihu. He's nobody. If I had Moshe Rabbeinu, they'd not listen to them. But I don't have Moshe Rabbeinu, so I'm not going to listen. So the Gemara says, this is why Hashem left the 70 unnamed. Because you can say, yes, no other generation is going to have Moshe Rabbeinu. No other generation is going to have Aaron, Nadav, and Avihu. But how can you say that no generation is going to have the 70 elders if you don't know who the 70 elders are? Maybe you do have. Maybe this rabbi over here is like one of the 70 to teach you that any Bedin comprised in any generation must be treated as if it's the bedin of Moshe Rabbeinu himself. Which means, once something is made as an halacha, that's what you go by. You don't go by something that's not halacha. So as much as everybody from Chabad and other places of Hasidut would like to pitch the Zohar Kadosh as a place that's the reason why they wear a wig, it's a complete lie and fabrication and desecration of the Torah and the sages. Why? Number one, if they know that, they should know that the sages did not make that halacha, which means they're not allowed to make it halacha. Number two, if they're going to go by the Zohar for the hair, how come they don't go by the Zohar for everything else? Oh, you're going to pick and choose? You're going to pick and choose? Then you have a serious problem. Why? The Gemara says, if you're going to pick the leniencies of Bet Shammai and Bet Hillel, and the stringencies of Bet Shammai and Bet Hillel, you're a fool and a blind person. You're not allowed to do such things like this. You can't just pick and choose like this. You have to go with the Chachamim. Shulchan Aruch says this is what we go by. So the reality is, Rabotai Karim, you cannot wear a wig because the Zohar says to cover all your hair. And even more so, you have to look at what the halacha is. And what is the halacha? The halacha is that you're allowed as a woman to show up to 3 fingerfuls of hair. You're allowed to show up to 3 fingerfuls of hair. Meaning that even if you wear your kisi rosh, like I wear my kippah, and you show 3 fingerfuls of hair like this, you are 100% kosher. Of course, if you want to be more stringent in order to sanctify Hashem's name and reach even a higher level of kedusha and cover every hair, like the Zohar Kadosh says, of course, there's going to be merits in Shemaim for you, special treatment for you in Shemaim, of course. But that's not halacha. That is a stringency that you're taking on yourself. Fine, but don't tell anybody else that's halacha. It's not. It's not halacha. Why? Because the chachamim that we have said that's not halacha. So don't go tell people, no, the wig is better because it covers all the hair. It's not true. It's not true. Why? Because the actual real halacha is not to cover every hair. And number two, the real halacha is not to cover the hair with a wig. The real halacha is to cover the hair with a mitpachat. The real halacha is to cover the hair with a hat. So you can't, dip into the mikveh with a pig on your arms and say, oh, it's kosher, it's kosher. No, it's still a pig. It's still a pig. It was a pig before the mikveh, it's a pig after the mikveh. Don't start creating things that you took the best of this and the worst of this and you made it kosher. That doesn't work that way. So for all of those people that want to make this excuse about, oh, it covers this, it covers that, that's a complete nonsense that goes against the sages, goes against all of the chachamim, goes against the Torah. Goes against the Torah. It's not the words of Hashem. And that's the reality. Even the Lubavitcher Rebbe himself wrote in a letter. I have it and I've provided it to many people. Lubavitcher Rebbe himself wrote in a letter he prefers mitpachat over wig. But they're not going to publicize that letter. Why? Because that letter kills them. So only a few that want to know the truth know this. The people that want to know the truth, they found this, they do it, and that's why I have a whole kehillah in a few places. Actually, one place for sure, in Seattle I think it is, another place, another location of Chabadniks. Women that took off the wig and put on the mitpachat. Because of what the Lubavitcher Rebbe said. Not even because of me. But I said it in his name. Why? Because that's the truth. That's what halacha is. So, as far as covering the hair, yes, you're supposed to cover your hair. Yes, you're supposed to cover as much of it as possible. Ideally, you'd cover every single hair. But even if you don't cover every single hair, you cover, in essence, 95% of it, 97% of it. You're still fine as long as it's with a mitpachat. If you're covering it with a wig, you have multiple problems. Number one, the wig is, if it's a real wig, it's impossible for you to know for sure that it's not coming from avodah zarah. And with safek avodah zarah, safek deoraita, we go to chumrah. We cannot be lenient when it comes to this. Something that's from the Torah, you cannot be lenient. You can't just say, no, not all of them. So it's not 100% sure. Even if there's a safek that it could come from avodah zarah, already forbids all of them. Forbids all real hair wigs. Anyone that's a real posek that really knows what they're talking about knows that you're not allowed to wear wigs. The problem is, how do you tell this to every rabbanit? How do you tell this? Why? Who has to tell her? Her husband, the rabbi. And he doesn't want Shalom Bayit problems. So it's a problem. It's a very difficult thing, but that's a reality. The reality is everybody knows you're not allowed to wear it. For one reason or another. Second reason is, aside from Avodah Zarah, is the modesty issue. Today's wigs are not the same as the wigs that even the sages that said it's allowed, like the Lubavitcher Rebbe or Rav Moshe Feinstein, that said it's allowed, they did not say that today's wigs are allowed. The ones that they said that are allowed are clearly known as wigs, seen as wigs. The wigs of today look real, more real than real hair. No one says those are allowed. Nobody. So anybody that says contrary is just simply not looking for the truth, or doesn't know much of what they're talking about, or a mix of both. But the point is that if they're going to continue taking their life that leniently, then most likely they have a lot of other problems also, because if they're that lenient when it comes to that, they're going to be a lot, very lenient about other things. That's just the reality. So it's it's sad that it's a plague among the religious community today, but it's not the only one. There's many other things. All of us have problems. Every household has a body in it. Everybody. But you have to get rid of at least the ones that are most obvious, and everybody knows that they need to do tshuva. If you do it, you don't do it, you'll pay the judgment. What can I tell you?